Okay, this is the Budget and Finance Committee meeting, and I'll call to order, and our next order of business is the approval of the September 16 committee minutes.
Move approval. Second.
Any comments? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Item number 3.
Item number 3 is the auto allowance issue. We brought this up, I guess, 2 meetings ago, the August Finance Committee meeting, and had discussed this, and the committee had asked for some additional information, and we have attached that, I think, on the back end of this memo that summarizes the current group of employees that have take-home vehicles, and we wanted to share that with you just so you saw where those are distributed and the magnitude of those. That there are 34 of those vehicles, and currently have 5 individuals that receive some form of auto allowance. So we wanted to provide you with that. We continue to think that this is an opportunity for us to save money in the long haul in terms of not purchasing and owning and maintaining vehicles, but maybe looking at the auto allowance as an option. The current level is at $200. We're not sure that that's the appropriate level to make this be an attractive option potentially for us, and so would like to look at an option to either raise that authority or come up with a formula or something that might help us have that option and explore that further. There are some of these positions that probably won't make sense to substitute an allowance for, but there may be others that are appropriate. I think we did do some additional survey to other communities. That's maybe a quick response on that.
Well, I think, as you know, it's been traditional government habit to just issue cars. Yeah. So what we found in doing the research was most cities continue to issue take-home vehicles, or what we assigned vehicles is probably a better way to address it, almost across the board. But the cities that have deviated from that and give allowances, and there were 6 or 7 that we got a list of, they vary anywhere from $150 up to $500 or $600 a month, depending on the situation, on the position, etc. The one that comes to mind right now is Clarksville. That was the last one reported. I think was $350 was kind of their standard issue. One of the things that those of us in finance wanted to accomplish with this was to try to weigh the cost of the vehicle versus getting an allowance, and to have that flexible enough where if you had someone that did a lot of driving on behalf of the city, that they could have a little more than $200 a month. That's probably not going to cover all the cost. And the data that we gave you was from the Automobile Club, and then we did some internal numbers that more or less verified what we saw with the Automobile Club. The one thing in looking at those Automobile Club average cost of service of a vehicle, they included taxes and some things that we don't have to pay. So they're a little higher than our average numbers. So it gave us a pretty good feeling about our numbers. The only thing I would point out is that our numbers are pretty much a year or 2 old now. We used 08 and 09 figures to assemble these numbers. Gas prices are a little higher now. The cost of vehicles are going to start going up again. So if we're going to look at this going forward as a remedy for some of the cars that we would otherwise have to buy, you have to think of what the future cost is going to be. And one of the reasons that we bring this to you now, normally you would think of this as coming to you in a budget, but we just passed a budget, and there's 14 or 15 vehicles in that budget that we're ready to purchase now. So if we're going to make a change in this is the moment when we need to think about this.
And I don't know if it would be helpful if you want us to develop a more specific policy, come back and say at this dollar amount or this dollar range. We provided you with some options.
But it might be helpful, I noticed there was an example of a maximum of $500 per month for 50% of the total ownership. I think getting more specific would probably be helpful I think, is everyone interested in pursuing this?
I think just, my question would be kind of what's the ballpark figure of how much money we can save in the long run, and, you know, I'm certainly for allowing some you having some flexibility as far as with your staff, and the only question I would have about that is, do you anticipate any problem as far as retention or recruitment without that tool? I'm sure for the executive level job that maybe not be as big.
I think having some discretion in this can be helpful in terms of recruitment, because I think people come at it from different angles and different perspectives with it, and so I think being able to have that option is something that can help us, actually. Because I think some folks see that as providing some flexibility where they don't have it, or may not have it with a city-owned vehicle only option, or just one approach. So I think that actually could be a good thing for us. And we'll have to look at what comes out when we're working with a potential candidate that we'd like to bring in and how they view this. But I view it as a positive generally if we get it somewhere more in what we think the market would ask for, which I think is what we're looking at. So.
Probably encourages less driving with an
It
allowance.
may.
I'd like for us to be sure we look at this, and I understand at upper levels that, you know, this may be an expected perk, but I'd like for us to evaluate this and see across the board real use and need, you know, because if somebody is getting a car and there's very little, you know, what's the reason that they need the car other than it being a perk? I understand all the staff that have to get out, deal with emergencies and so forth afterwards, that they may have specific equipment, so you don't have to go and switch, you know, to get your regular one. But, you know, we need to decide whether this is going to be a perk or something that's actually needed. And I would like for you to maybe look at that from that point. When we do job rate comparisons for salaries, do we include this as part of the salary?
Part of the package.
For the package?
I don't think we typically do.
I think we really should.
Sure, we could probably answer it better, but I mean, it's not methodically done.
And do the other cities also include these?
We've done it both ways. You know, like if I'm asking, for instance, when we were hiring Mr. Stuckey, when I went out on surveys, we did ask, you know, what other perks are they given? When we do police chief, things like that, yes, they're included. If we just do a general survey to say, what is your minimum, your mid, and your max, no, we don't get that, but we have done it both ways.
What other cities are going to automobile allowances versus issuing, you know, the vehicles? And do we know that and how they're doing and do we have any benchmark here?
Well, that's what Russ is reflecting on and talking. It's not something that folks are doing a lot of. We're sort of taking a lead here and doing this, but you know, when we look at the ownership costs of 30-some vehicles compared to maybe an allowance approach, that may give us some cost benefit, and it may be more attractive to the employee as well. Yeah, in certain cases, there are, you know, inspectors and folks that are involved. Yeah, you're never going to probably change that. That just seems to fit the job, and it is a needed tool.
Because they're using it all the time.
Exactly.
They're going out constantly, they're doing it. And what Ann was saying, I think that we do need some kind of cost.
Get more specifics, I guess.
I think so.
I know years ago when I was partners in a car dealership, when we let the employees have a vehicle, of course, there was no limits on where they could drive it. If they took a vacation, they could. But back then, and that was like in the 80s.
Late 80s, of course.
It was very late. Way too young for it to be. Yeah, late 80s. It was like $650 back then, if you counted the car, the insurance, you know, the wear and tear and everything. It was averaged in as $650 a month.
Well, this may be a time to also, since we're talking about setting different policy, maybe a good time to review who has and who doesn't have the cars, because I don't see in here, I see some inspectors, but some other people, I guess, that I thought would be in here, like in codes, the inspectors, they don't have.
They don't drive them home.
They share, we have
That's
vehicles
right.
here that they use. They have city-owned vehicles that
So-
stay here.
So they
Well, of
drive
course-
here and they get the car.
Of course, right.
They go out in a city vehicle.
Yeah, they're not take-home.
But then again, I don't think codes very often is an emergency situation.
Less
either.
likely to be called out, there can be times.
But it would be good to have just a review of what and why, maybe. And also, as was stated, the mileage, or, I don't know, not mileage, but something like the cost associated with it. Because it seemed to me it was a little bit all over the map in terms of even with directors of departments. It wasn't the same thing with everyone. And so, if we're looking at this, and I think the agreement is that we do want to look at it, and certainly, look very strongly at making a change here. I think it is that also is a time to look to see what to re-examine what we have right now.
In this last page in the back, these amounts,
It's per paycheck.
It's per paycheck, so
every 2 weeks?
It works out to $200 a month, which is the policy that this
that's the
committee
existing
set.
policy.
Well, the existing policy does need to be amended because that was given actually when you didn't have a car, I didn't, and the city attorney, when we created that position, it was brought up, and they decided it was not fair for the rest of especially when we were going back and forth for other things, like for cities, we used to have employment appreciation, and Russ was out too, and we were all driving to different places every day, and we hauled things for the city and go to different departments. So that was voted on, but it does need, and that's when, I don't think any other cities were giving allowances at that time, they were giving cars, and this was just in lieu of it.
Do we have a take-home car policy on as far as liability or insurance or other
We do.
individuals that would be in the car or restrictions?
There's a lengthy policy about vehicles in total. I think what's driven this more than anything else is, and I guess it surprised me that more cities have not taken a look at this, was when we really addressed what the total ownership of a car really cost. Because, you used to buy a squad car for $15,000, $16,000 and slap on $1,000 worth of lights and so on. And the insurance was pretty low and gas was pretty cheap. And, you didn't think about it quite as much. Well, it's a different world out there now. So we're just sharpening the pencil a little.
And also, if we could get, I think we didn't get the information about like Clarksville and those other things, did we?
Did not. We had, again, we were surprised at the lack of response that we got from the cities that had not really taken a look at this. But we can get you, it's only 5 or 6 that responded.
Yeah, I was just wondering, I was just wondering, when I asked that question before, if there's anybody out, so we're sort of out there by ourselves doing this, I mean, people really haven't jumped on board with this?
We find ourselves in that position quite
A lot
a
of
bit.
time. Okay.
Okay, well, are we wrapped up on this? I mean, I don't know, do we need a motion or just saying
No,
that?
let us work up a more
consensus is
specific
that-
policy for you to
Right. show
show you the cost comparison in terms of an estimated savings. So if we convert one of these from a take-home to a allowance at a certain rate, what does that mean in terms of savings, maybe over the life of a vehicle, that kind of thing? Give you that example, get you the more survey information, and come back with that for you. We wouldn't do a one-size-fits-all on this anyway. There are some that are probably always going to make sense as take-homes.
Yes.
There are others
Yes.
that we'll want to explore this with.
And I think it would be attractive to maybe have an option that you decide for recruitment. Some people would rather use that money and help pay on their own vehicle, where others don't want to use their
Right.
personal vehicle, they'd rather have one. So I think that would be a...
So that could be another part of the,
Just have some
discussion,
flexibility to work with
right.
people on that too. And we may find that certain jobs fit better to have it than we thought as we do it, so.
thank you. Item 4 is the review and discussion of the retiree insurance.
We have a sunset clause that will come into play July 1st, 2011 for all retiree insurance. Currently, there are several different plans that all end when the employee becomes 65. Now, if they become 65 and their spouse is not, the spouse can keep it until they're 65 as well, but they all end at that. We have a sunset clause, all of them have a sunset clause for the same time, which is July 1st. And we just wanted to let you know that we are looking at that and options. We are talking with our attorneys about alternatives and what we can do to complete this.
So is there anything that we need to do right now, or?
Now, remind me right now, we had the thing where you could contribute if you were going to retire before retirement age that was used as a supplement for the insurance?
Well, it was...
Am I confusing things?
It was money that was pre-taxed, and when you want to use it towards your insurance, it is still pre-taxed. And we no longer have that for everyone because it had to be a mandatory where everybody could contribute, and the city would have to contribute in order to do that. So it's frozen. We're not using that. However, police and fire, public safety can currently take $3,000 a year out of their ICMA and put it toward their cost of insurance. But that's only for public sector, and that's the only ones ICMA will allow to do that. Currently, we do have, if you're 62 with 20 years of service, you can keep the insurance you have at the employee rate until you're 65. Yeah, no, after, all of our insurance ends at age 65. Then there is a Plan B that you can be 55 with 30 years of service, and you can, I'm not sure how great this is, but you have the COBRA rate less the 2%. So it is the full amount the city pays, or the full amount of the cost of insurance. You can do it for single or family on that. Then we also have the option 2, which is a larger deductible, and the city pays a portion of that, and the employee for family coverage, I think, pays a little over $400. Is that correct? So there are several different plans, and then there is the special plan that when they did, right before we came, when they did the early retirement option, and they let people retire and they gave them a special rate. So when they retire, we have plans all over the board. They do sunset. We are going to look, I talked to Eric, there are standalone retirement plans for insurance. We want to look at that this year as well as combining it with our insurance for all of the employee base. We do have the numbers, and I'll be glad to get them to you for what the retirees are actually costing each year. We do have that broken out.
That would be worthy to look at.
And we will get that to you as well.
Another question is that once they retire and you say this is the rate, does that stay or is that adjusted each year with our health costs for retirees?
On Plan B, each year the COBRA rate increases, the retiree is going to pay that because right now they're paying all of that. They're just allowed to keep the insurance, not just like for 18 months or for 2 years. It's until they're 65, but they've got to pay the full cost. They will. The people that are on the insurance that are 62 with 20 years pay exactly what the employees pay. So if that goes up for the employee portion, it'll go up for them. And then the special group that did the early retirement, if it goes up, I believe they're guaranteed a certain amount, right, that they pay each time. So theirs is not going to go up. Yeah, that one is out. But there's only, the good news, there's only 21 people on it, or 21 families, yeah.
And does that go out at age 65 or not?
Yes.
Okay. So
All,
really-
you know,
All obligations.
all medical benefits provided end at age 65.
Okay.
And as I said, if the spouse turns 65 and the employee's not, the employee gets to keep it, the spouse goes off. If the employee turns 65 and the spouse is not 65, the plan says that they can stay on until they're 65.
So they couldn't, if the employee was 60 and the spouse was 65, the employee,
spouse would-
the former employee, they could not pay additional to keep them on there?
No, because they're eligible for Medicare.
You're talking about retirees now. You're not
Yeah,
talking
these are
about-
retirees, not
These are
employees.
retirees.
Yeah, I know.
If you're employed, then,
Okay.
And it was written to help bridge that gap when they retire
To get them
until they
to
can get Medicare. And when they can get Medicare, very few would stay on this. They would take the Medicare and get a supplement because
Yeah,
it would be
supplement.
more economical anyway. And I think the city was trying to
Okay.
help it the most they can help with the least amount of impact.
so we'll get some further information about this.
Yes, I just wanted to alert you that we are looking at
That,
this.
especially on this timeline here. I think that's very
timeline's
important.
important,
Yes, thank
This
you.
is kind of part B of the pension cost issues that we're working with, so, and this will also match up with our update on our insurance overall for employees.
Which all of our employee benefits
Everything comes up.
come up this year, so we'll be busy.
Interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so item 5 is the review and discussion of the professional investment advisory services.
And much like the auto allowance, this is an item we brought to you 2 months ago. Excuse me. And this is an idea that really I came back with from the National Finance Officers Conference. What I see among cities our size are, those cities are starting to move towards professional advice on their investment portfolio. We've talked a lot over the last year about the pension plan. We have professional advice. We have advisors and specific money managers for that. But we basically trust our staff, our in-house staff, to invest some pretty considerable amounts of money from time to time. You know what our reserves are like, and we do have spikes when we have taxes come in and so on. That money, by our investment policy, is required to be invested. But we don't have specialty staff that does that type of investment. We take a very passive approach. We buy and hold. We do only those things that the most conservative things, purchases that the state allows us to do. And very frankly, most cities have found that they're leaving some money on the table. And it's not just grabbing for additional yield, but they're probably not as diversified, and they're probably not taking it, distributing the risk as widely as they could do. So one of the steps involved in this process, if we want to look at that, is to put out an RFP and see and there are many of these investment specialists across the nation that specialize in municipal investments. They know that how strict the state laws are and what you can and cannot do. Again, the proposal that I'm bringing to you is from a gentleman that I know through the association that is retired and does this now for a living. He has nothing to do with the advisors themselves. He just puts together the investment policies and the RFPs to get the proposals from the different investment advisors. I'm not necessarily recommending him, but if this committee would like to go down that road, this is probably the person that I would recommend to do that, but there is a significant cost in doing that, and I wanted to explore and see if you're interested in going that route. There is an alternative to this too, and that is we can get our purchasing department and our finance department to put together an RFP internally. It may not be quite as good the first time around as what someone who does this for a living would put together. But nonetheless, I think it is worth pursuing over the next 6 months or so to get some quotes from these professional advisors and see if we're going to be interested in having professional advice and what the rate would be. I mean, professional advice is going to cost somewhere between 6 or 8 or even 10 basis points. So at the level that we're investing now, where we're lucky to get 1%, we probably don't want to be paying for this. But as we all know, the rates aren't going to stay where they are now forever. And when we come out of this, I think we're going to need some professional advice to get our money in the right place and to maximize the yield that we get based on the amount of risk we're willing to take.
But from what you just said, then, this would not be cost effective in the short term.
It would not be cost effective. It will probably take us 4 to 6 months to do this, and I can't tell you where the rates would be right now. I wouldn't initiate this at the moment in terms of hiring the advisor. But I think if we want to hire an advisor and have them in place, let's say a year from now, when rates do start going back up, we need to start moving sometime early spring at the latest as far as putting out this request for proposal and taking bids on this.
Do you think that in a year from now, we're going to be seeing rates of 8%?
I don't think 8%. The cost of an advisor like this would be 8 basis points or 0.8%, 0.08%.
But this process is just for him to put together an RFP to select a company.
And take the bids and advise us, screen the bids, analyze the quotes, and make a recommendation. Yes.
And that would only be the $13,000 that we see in here.
So what Mike's saying, what I hear you saying is, so we're thinking maybe we might hire a specialized person to write an RFP. Okay, an RFP needs to be written by already a specialized person who writes these specialized RFPs to hire a specialized municipal investor advisor. Is that right? So it's like,
It is right.
in other words, we wouldn't, I heard you say something about maybe we could internally put an RFP together.
It could be.
But what you're saying, what I'm hearing you say is that these are sort of integral and they're specialized, so maybe hiring somebody to do that RFP would be wise?
We're pretty good at putting together standard RFPs, and we can probably ask most of the right questions. What we don't have experience at is doing the interviews and doing the analysis of the bids that come in from these various
And
people.
they would be
Analyzing their experience, the cities they've worked with.
So they would do all that?
They would do all of
They'd
that.
write it, and they'd analyze the people,
Yes.
and then what would we get? We would get the top 2 or 3 that they would have.
They would bring finalists
You get a
in,
recommendation.
much as we do with our pension plan on our money managers, for interviews. And they would make presentations to this committee.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the timeline for this. So usually on an RFP, what's the open part of selecting that company that we would,
Well,
not to resubmit for the RFP, but for us to tell one of the companies that we were considering as an advisor? You know, I'm trying to look, if maybe a year or so is not going to be economical, you know, do we, how late do we issue this RFP so that things are in
We
effect
get it when we want it.
Sort of.
by the time
That's
that
when you
we
need
Because you get,
to do it, you know?
you get a proposal and it's good for so long.
Yeah,
Right, if it's,
3 months.
you know, 6 months.
60 days or
or
90 days,
whatever.
Well,
typical.
in the packet, he basically says that the quickest we can do it is 20 weeks turnaround. And of course, if we started tomorrow morning, we've got the holidays that are going to intervene, so it's probably going to be spring before we would have people here for interviews, perhaps budget time before we would make a selection. So that, you know, depending on where interest rates go, and I'm not saying that they couldn't help us in a low interest rate environment. In fact, a lot of the people that have that have gone this route have done it because yields have dropped, and they need someone who can better manage this. Again, we don't have anyone that we can sit in front of a monitor and do this on an hourly basis, day after day after day. I mean, we're doing other things. So, that's where the value would be in hiring someone like this.
It doesn't take long to make up a fee for the guy to do this.
Well,
I mean, if he just gains just a little bit, so it seems to fit well with our policies we've been implementing, that we get good sound advice and move forward on it. It makes a lot of sense.
Well, I think the time has come for a couple of reasons. As you know, we had a pretty sizable fund balance, but over the last, say, 3 years, when the markets locked up and so on, we used a lot of that cash to fund the projects that we were doing. We've now borrowed the money through the bond market, and we've refilled the coffers, so to speak, in terms of the reserves. So that money is there to be invested. We also have the bond money that is not yet spent, that we're nursing for the time being, that could be invested. We have impact fees that could be invested. So the numbers are growing, and from our reserve policy, and I'm assuming budgets will go back up at some point in the future, that we won't continue to cut them ad infinitum. But when the budgets go back up, the reserves are going to have to go back up too, to be in adherence with our policies. So the numbers are only going to grow. And that's why I think it's probably a good time. It may be a little early to start, but it would probably be a good idea to go ahead and start looking at this.
Well, I guess whenever you mentioned the holidays coming in, would it be wise to start this and then have the holidays interrupt, or what, and start it immediately after that? I mean, I have no feeling one way or the other.
No, if it
It's
matters.
the guy that's doing the work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think people would start letting their thing.
He may feel like he likes to work through the holidays.
We could instruct someone like this to wait and start after the first of the year.
But,
Well,
I
in
think
that sense, and we probably do need to wrap up because we've got the other meeting really needs to start right now.
we're going to have somebody.
Is there a feeling that we want to go ahead and
Forward, yes.
Yeah.
I recommend we
recommend to the board to?
recommend this to the board.
Yeah, because they obviously have got to write a specialized RFP.
We'd
Because-
essentially be bringing a contract for these
Yeah.
services, and we'll bring that at a future meeting
Because it's really important who we get.
and start that
Because I was
process.
in a system like that before, and the people they had wasn't too hot. And then they got rid of them and brought another company that had much larger portfolios and much better resources. So,
I was going
yeah,
to.
motion.
Yeah, I didn't say I moved, did I? I moved that we recommend this.
Okay, and there's a second? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and then the number 6 was the information only monthly report. Call those to your attention.
And if you have any questions about them, just shoot me an email.
Yep.
Sales
So
tax
we
was
are
up.
going up.
Sales tax was up
7
for
months
2
in a row.
months.
2 months. Yeah, that's good.
I still look back at those other years.
Oh, I know.
2 years out of the
And-
full contract.
Go.
Right, exactly.
I was feeling okay, you said.
I was too, when I looked at it. Yeah, but I went,
You have to go back to 2000.
Let's not do that.